This podcast is coming to you from Wongal, Gadigal and Birrabirragal country, also known as Balmain, where the Global Centre for Social Justice and Advocacy Leadership is located. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the country we share and agree that sovereignty was never ceded. Kia ora and welcome everyone to this episode of A Juster Generation. We are coming to you today from Ngunnawal country, where I'm currently at. That's the nation's capital in Canberra. But normally we would come from Gadigal, Wongal and Birrabirragal country in what is now known as Balmain in Australia. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we're meeting on, the custodians of the land we meet today, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Today, it's our great pleasure to welcome to the podcast Robert Oliver. Robert is from New Zealand and grew up in Fiji and Samoa. He's probably best known to our Australian listeners as a judge on the famous reality TV show My Kitchen Rules. He is, however, also the brain and executive director behind MKR's equally popular Pacific sister show, The Pacific Island Food Revolution. And in doing so, Robert revealed himself as the instigator and driver of a whole new social movement taking place throughout our region, which celebrates a return to healthy and delicious traditional Pacific cuisine. It's an absolute privilege to have you with us, Robert.
Great to see you.
Robert, your parents are from New Zealand.
Yeah.
But you grew up in the 1970s in Fiji and Samoa.
Yeah.
Can you tell our listeners and audience what that was like and what role did that upbringing play in developing not only your love for food and cooking, but also perhaps your understanding of the Pacific?
Sure. I grew up mainly in Fiji, went to school in Fiji, and it was right after independence. So there was this, it's often referred to as the golden years of Fiji, the Ratumara years of Fiji. There was a great feeling of hope and, there's a very future kind of feeling about the whole era. We moved there because my dad was contracted by the YMCAs of New Zealand to deliver a bunch of social work programs. I mean, the YMCA is usually like gyms and camps, right? But my dad did these amazing, innovative community development projects. They're really well ahead of their time because people talk about localization and, the Pacific of Futures conference that we were just at in Fiji was all about the brilliance of Pacific culture leading Pacific development. My dad was in that place already in the 70s. And he's written a couple of books about it that I refer to all the time to this day. In fact, I often think, what would my dad do whenever I've got any challenge whatsoever? So I was brought up in this household of community comes first, and people matter. And I didn't realize until I was much older that was the kind of the environment that I was nurtured in, because you often just don't pay a lot of attention to your parents when you're a teenager. And looking back, I can see how deeply influential it was. My father, especially in the way that I've worked myself. And then just the brilliance of being in Fiji and coming from New Zealand, like, supermarket culture was emerging and everything was in plastic and wrapped and sterile. And then you walk into the market in Suva, it's just like completely alive, and the food and the laughter and the gossip and just the tumult of it all. It's just it's like life, it was like coming alive. And I really hooked into the Pacific food thing quite quickly. I think one thing that happened was there was a dock strike when we arrived. And so there were no Palangi ingredients coming in. And my mum had to learn how to cook local, like from day one. And there's some pretty funny family stories about some of the taro disasters and all that kind of stuff. But it meant that she was in the market all the time and I was often along with her. And I look back on that time as, why I love food and why, in particular, I love the food of the Pacific.
It's funny you should say taro disasters. I heard that actually a New Zealand chef, and I hope it wasn't you, Robert,
Yeah,
and actually
we'll see.
tried to use taro leaves in a salad as a fresh ingredient.
No, that
And
would not be me. We don't want itchy throat.
well, that's right.
Yeah,
And actually, it ended up being a pretty dramatic situation where,
yeah, I'll bet.
again, learning from the traditional knowledge of these foods as much
Yeah,
as their use as a staple crop, as part of the way in which the Pacific has survived for thousands of years on these
yeah,
really difficult, the reasons, root crops are what they are in the Pacific, along
mm.
with a reliance on fish, is because that is what you can grow and that is what you can get, along with
and it's healthy. I
absolutely.
mean, uh, the breadfruit and taro and all those root crops that are the kind of the foundation, kakanandina as they call them in Fiji, which means like true food. Those they're full of nutrients, and a
Mm.
lot of the reason that one of the reasons that Pacific Health has found itself in trouble is because white rice has been replacing those nutrient dense traditional crops that are so good.
Yeah,
And they're still there. They're everywhere. They're on the trees, they're in the gardens, they're in the markets.
yeah.
Yeah,
Now, we spoke a little bit about it at the dinner we shared in Fiji. One of the things that always struck me in looking at the challenge is it's actually a challenge of the modern pressures of life in many
yeah,
respects. And
yeah,
it's not just because people are transferring their diet preferences to things like white rice and to processed food, but actually it's a convenience, because to
yeah.
do these crops properly and to cook them properly in the Pacific takes preparation time, takes time to actually have, of which we had a lot more time in the old days. But now
I
it's
hear
difficult.
you, but I feel that argument's been amplified beyond its reality.
Right.
Because first of all, it's the argument that's put back to why people are eating instant noodles and the very fast food type options that have given rise to the non-communicable disease crisis in the Pacific. But actually, the rest of the world is turning back to cooking,
Mm.
and these crops. One thing with Pacific Island Food Revolution, one of the criteria we had behind the scenes, by the way, was to do recipes that you could do quickly at home. So yes, if you're doing an umu every day, that's laborious, but there's loads of other ways of using these crops that are quick, will be on the table in 20 minutes, etc., etc. So it's about the creativity coming back into the original food culture space.
And that was something you mentioned was part of the program design, is to challenge chefs and challenge, or just people who are
Cooks, yeah,
cooking food, to think about the different ways in which to bring food quickly to the table,
yeah.
but also to be based on the nutritious tradition of the Pacific.
Yeah, although to be honest, I shied away from talking about health, and a couple of reasons for that. Yes, going back to eating local is a massive step towards good health. But Pacific people have been inundated with what I would call nutritionism
Mm.
over the years about don't eat coconut, don't eat this, too many carbs, yada yada yada, and it's just a minefield of kind of information that doesn't really help with what you're going to put on the table for dinner that night.
Mm.
And so the reason Pacific Island Food Revolution promotes Pacific food culture is because culture is easy to grasp. It's easy to get hold of, but also it's beautiful and it's delicious and it reaffirms identity. And I've always thought that the different cuisines of the Pacific Islands, and I don't say Pacific cuisine because, of course, there's Vanuatu, there's Fiji, they're all different cuisines.
Mm.
But I've always seen them as being as good as Thai or French, what we would call the great cuisines of the world.
Mm.
And so that's kind of the impetus behind my work in many ways. It's almost like plugging people back into their own beauty.
Mm.
Yeah,
I love watching the clips from the show, and
yeah,
one of the things that really struck me is not only did you tap in to this love of the traditional foods that we've known and consumed for thousands of years, but also the competitive aspect of the Pacific, and the
yeah,
fact that all these countries, all these hosts each one saying our food's the best.
Yeah,
It was
absolutely.
fantastic.
You know, something is that, when I worked on my kitchen rules, I was very cynical about reality TV. And when I got offered the role on MKR, it's the New Zealand version of that, by the
Mm.
way, I was a bit like, well, this is trashy TV and I prefer to do, cultural TV or something. But then I saw, actually, if you want to mainstream something, you go to like the reality formats because everyone watches them.
Yeah.
And so it does tap into that good natured thing, that the sporting thing. But I want to add that the good naturedness of it all, it's not I'm going to win and someone's going to lose. That spirit
Yeah.
just doesn't exist in the Pacific. And we found that people really often would go help each other out
Yeah.
when they're supposed to be competing. And also there was just a thrill when a team did really well from the other teams. So it's just so it's such a potent reminder of how the kind of the Pacific psyche is the psyche that I wish the whole world would adopt.
Mm.
Yeah.
But it is very family oriented, and that's the thing. The kainga, your extended family, is so important to you. And in fact, eating is so deeply entrenched into the relationship you have with your family. And
Yeah.
I was moved to see. I can't remember his name, the health official that was on your program.
Oh, Dr. John Ahawea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how emotional he got about, reinforcing to all of the
Yeah.
competitors, this is not about a competition, it's about the future health of our region. and
Yeah,
and and
absolutely.
and it was something that I thought, yes, but the emotion he brought, I could see, was because along with myself and many others, we've lost people
Yeah.
to
Me too.
NDCs.
Absolutely. And he is on the front line. He speaks from his real life experience. It wasn't the result of a report that he read. It's actually his life.
Mm.
So he was, I mean, I had such good luck with the people. We did the show in Fiji, Samoa, Vanuatu, and Tonga, and it was set up to be episodes in each country, and then each country has a winning team. Then they all come together and compete for like the kind of regional winning title. But I had such good luck with in each country. I had a co-host from that country, and I had such good luck with the quality and the narrative and the depth that they all brought to the show, and the fun.
Mm.
And the fun. I mean, I'd known them all for a long, long time, so that really helped. And we'd all been wanting to work together in some way, but we'd never had that regional project that brought us all together. So the show's been terrifically effective in terms of bringing a new food narrative into the region, or just reminding people that the recipes from the past are the blueprint for the future. But it was also just a delight to do. Like, I really loved filming, and just at the end of filming, we'd all get a bit mournful because this beautiful process that we'd all created together would feel like it was over for a bit. And so it was a very emotional experience for me and my co-host as well.
Mm. I mean, it just shows also the power of media to really be an influential. We talk a lot in the center about the different tools of the trade
Yeah.
in advocacy and in trying to achieve change, trying to get shifts in policy, shifts in systems to actually create better outcomes in social justice. And I
Yeah.
can see that, you're an example with this program of actually doing exactly that by targeting a really important issue in the community, but
Mm.
responding to it in a way that really addresses some of the things outside of just consumption of food that are part of the process of thinking through how do we get the change that's needed.
Yeah. I mean, I always wanted to make something that people wanted to be a part of.
Mm.
And because that's the hook to mainstream a concept, right? Is to make it into a movement. And I feel that we did that well. Certainly our viewership is a testament to that. And it's not just the transactional, it's a feeling you get, and I've had this over and over again. People people watching the show and also people who were in the show realizing that their culture is their cure. And that's a very profound thing to really absorb and integrate. And it's a beautiful thing to experience for me to see that, and for our platform, the platform we put together to be the platform that allows that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think I got the same message when I was in Brazil recently for the Acampamento Terra Livre, and the theme of the meeting, which is a gathering of all of the indigenous tribes of the Amazon who come together in Brazil to talk about issues that they need. And the theme of this year was "The Answer Is Us," and it had this resonation to a range of things. But you're saying it yourself in terms of it being found in the heart of what people have in their culture that has meant that they've sustained themselves for thousands of years in some cases in often very tough conditions.
In these cultures in particular, often the cultures that are viewed as powerless because they may not have the economic machinery or they may not have the political clout that supposedly more powerful countries have, but they've got this greater power of who they are and what they know and what they respect and what they dignify. And there's a lot of talk around the indigenous solution around climate change, for example, and everyone agrees that the indigenous solution is the solution. But to make that happen, you've got to mainstream these concepts. The indigenous solution is not just the indigenous solution for indigenous people.
No, that's right.
It's the indigenous solution for the whole planet.
Absolutely.
And I was just last year I was at the FAO World Food Forum in Rome, and I was with the Indigenous Peoples Unit, and I realized it was a real realization to me that indigenous solutions, indigenous people are put into a box by the powers that be, and they think that it's wise and right and worthy, the ideologies and the kind of recipes for climate change mitigation, etc. But because they're in a box, they're not mainstreaming them. They don't get the investment they need for the ideas to be mainstream, because most of the kind of Western framed powers view the indigenous solution as only for indigenous people. They haven't understood it's for them too.
Can we segue, if it's possible here, because I think it's a good point in terms of your work internationally. You worked overseas as an executive chef for more than 20 years.
Yeah.
You worked hard and partied hard in New York and in the Caribbean islands.
Yeah.
But it seems your work was always driven by social justice and an interest in sustainability, from cooking for homeless people in New York to developing the farm to table movement in the tourism industry in the Caribbean. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
That goes back to my father's work, really, and also just to being imprinted upon by growing up in the Pacific, is that I didn't know that I thought differently from other people that I was working with, etc. But you do think in terms of everybody instead of just yourself. And so, I mean, the project feeding homeless people in New York, that was really powerful for me, and it was thanks to a really good Native American advocacy group that I partnered with on that, and a woman called Gail Kelly, because it was simple for me. I was going home from work and I was noticing guys on the corner who were homeless, and I started off bringing meals home for them, and then over time there'd be more and more guys on the corner because the word got out. And then I started networking with some other friends to other chefs, and it just became a program of restaurants contributing meals to the homeless community. And it goes back to the essential, what is food? It's not just the chef experience, the creativity, the glamour of food media, etc. It's also hunger and the lack of food, and it's food. And what is education of food? There's all these other spaces around food, but the justice bit, it just seemed wrong to me that people were not able to eat in this big, amazing city. Yeah.
It sort of led to, obviously, the experience in that world, and the global financial crisis saw you return to the Pacific and publish in 2010 your first cooking book,
Yeah.
Me'akai,
Yeah.
The Food and Flavors of the South Pacific.
Yeah.
This book was very much a work of love and of belonging to community. It went on to win the Pulitzer Prize of the world of fine cuisine, the Gorman's Best Cookbook in the World Prize. This must have been a huge project. And what prompted you to write the book, and what did that experience mean to you?
You know, um, I, I when I was working in the Caribbean, I was working for a big hotel group, and the owner of the hotel group, they had this dilemma: 80% of their vegetables and etc. for the hotel menus was being imported, and yet there were all these farmers locally. So how do you localize um, that situation, that buying, that supply chain? Well, the answer was in local cuisine. Local cuisine requires local agriculture. So and I very much followed in the footsteps of the great Jessica Harris, who had done some of this work before me. But that was like the secret sauce, if you will. And I did that for a few years, and we set up growing contracts with farmers, and over time the imports went down and the farm supply went up. And then I was like, well, the Pacific's got the same issue. I remember very well that there's very little local cuisine on the hotel menus, and that there's always been, from my father's day, a problem with all the food being imported for the biggest industry in the region, by the way. I mean, if this one thing was fixed, there'd be no need for foreign aid or development sector activity in the Pacific, because the Pacific would be completely financially independent just through the tourism industry if this was calibrated correctly. But taking that cuisine epiphany into the Pacific, I needed to identify that cuisine. And I needed people to see that their food was a cuisine, not just food for, outback or the beauty of it. And so that's how the first book came about. And I had really amazing support. I've been very influenced by a woman called Mrs. Suliana Siwatimbao from Fiji, and many people in Fiji have been influenced by her. And she was a good friend of my mum's and dad's. And so she really guided me in the process of that book.
Yeah.
And then Auntie Tafunai in Samoa, Batausi Mackenzie Rowe in Vanuatu, these women through the Pacific saw that I was running around writing this book, and that its time had come. And they were like, well, we want to help this guy. And that's how it all came about. So I still get chills when I think that we won the Gourmand Award. I mean, that's just insane. We're up against the New York Times, and it was I went to Paris for the awards with Shiri Ram, who was the photographer for the cookbook, and Shiri had never been in snow before, and so it was all insane. But I really felt everybody who'd worked on the book with me when we won, and it felt like a win for all. And it felt that way in the Pacific as well. Mm-hmm. And I felt like the various cuisines of the Pacific Islands were taking their place at the table along with the great cuisines of the world, and it felt like a really golden moment to me.
Just in terms of that, it's makes me think in terms of your journey to that cookbook, and that your journey to I guess reacquainting yourself with Pacific cuisine, but also Pacific cultural aspects. One of the things I always remember when my dad talked to his brothers about growing Pacific Island food, like root crops like yam, taro, and other crops to potentially sell at the market as an income stream for the family. My uncles were very clear that those foods are gifts, not to be sold. And it was an interesting cultural thing that and did you find
you must be Tongan?
I am Tongan.
Because that speaks to feasting and the generosity associated with feasting.
That's very true. And it also is the way in which food is presented. It's in Fiji as well. There's actually a photo I saw yesterday of the presentation of food at a chiefly ceremony in Fiji in 1941. I think it was also some photo from the 20th century. And it had this mound of taro along with a turtle on its back, and then also some kava. And I just thought it is this gift giving and food and gift giving being part of the culture of the Pacific that is entrenched in, and even the role of women in terms of food preparation as part of the gift of it? And did that come into the conversation that you had? I mean,
It came into the show all the time, and
mm,
and it's because I had, like, Princess Pialevu really gave us Princess Pialevu hosted the Tongan episodes with me in Tonga, and she brought this love language to the show, and she spoke really about things that you just mentioned, um, and it coming from her, that was, you know, how Tongans are about the royal family. It was just so much. It gave us so much credibility around being able to use that kind of language and
mm.
speak of love and the loving nature of cooking for someone, and so it, I would not say that it was a literal theme. It was more one of those themes that pervaded everything we did. And I remember we did an interview after the launch of the whole project in Fiji, and Princess Pearl and I were being interviewed by Fiji media, and one of the reporters said to her, "Well, what is the show actually? What's it actually about?" And she said, "It's about love."
Mm.
And I was, it might have been hard for me to say that because people usually want like a very linear type of answer from me, but for her to say that was brilliant, and it really it's really true, and we all felt that, yeah,
No, it is, and it is so many cultures across the Pacific. It is this representation of the love you have for your family,
yeah,
the love you share with your family, shared in the culture of food and the way it's presented and the way you eat communally and engage communally around these things. So, I think you've captured that in your response.
yeah.
Yep. Pacific Island countries, and let's get back to a more serious topic on
Uh-huh.
on this, have the highest prevalence of diabetes in the world, with high
Mm.
rates of obesity. Colonialism and a change of traditional cuisine to imported processed foods and fast foods are contributing factors to this epidemic. Let's call it that.
Yeah,
Uh, we've talked a little bit about that, but after the experience and success of your first cooking book, you became a UN Development Program advocate for food, sustainable development, and well-being. How does the Pacific Island food revolution fit into this context, and what role does the project also play in building local community resilience to climate change? And I'm thinking you talked about the food revolution actually expanding now globally, potentially into other regions as part of the show's growth and the challenge of keeping it going in the Pacific. Maybe you can
yeah,
talk
yeah.
about all of these things.
Um, you know, yes, you're absolutely right. And the development themes in the Pacific, which the UN and UNDP and all the development organizations are trying to address, are around themes of climate change, maintaining biodiversity, uh, gender roles, and all those things, right? We know that every DFAT, MFAT, and all the development sector want to fix. But you can do a lot with food in that space. And just by localizing a food economy, has huge climate change implications. So people in their kitchens can actually take a climate action by choosing to eat local food. That is a climate action.
Hmm.
So so and when you talk about potentially a whole region going local and converting their food system to be a localized food system, that's where the Pacific plays really well, because we're smaller countries, we can do national models.
Hmm.
Um, so it's like a kind of a crossover of the development themes and the food space, and then how do we activate that? And that's where the entertainment bit comes in.
Hmm.
As far as the growth of Pacific Island Food Revolution goes, I was just I just I had the good luck to be awarded a fellowship by the Rockefeller Foundation, and I came from that just recently. I've been up in Italy at the Bellagio Center for early this year with a bunch of amazing people, and I'd never written Pacific Island Food Revolution up as a manifesto. I just kept doing it,
Hmm.
and but I didn't have an overall kind of sense of what it actually was, that I could ever say to someone or give to someone. I had support from the New Zealand and Australian government, and so there was all the accountability that goes with that, which was tremendously helpful in terms of documentation. But I'm like a creative, fluffy guy. I would have just kept on mucking through it and instinctively getting it right, probably, but I wouldn't have had the documentation to say this is how to do it. So that's what I got the chance to do at Rockefeller Foundation. And one thing that came up for me was that the template, the food revolution model, is can be used in other places, and that conversation's now happening with. I'm having conversations with Hawaii and other places around what does their food revolution look like. The challenge has been is that there are very few kind of development investors in the Pacific, and we've had trouble staying alive. I mean, we had a big USAID fund that was looking super good and all approved and stuff, but that's all gone as with all USAID out of the region. So yeah, I've got to come up with a new way of doing business in the region. And meantime, these other food revolutions are going to start to evolve as well.
Well, it sounds like there's a conversation with the Australia Broadcasting Corporation's Pacific Broadcasting Network.
Oh no, they've been great, and we've had really good relationships. They broadcast the show, and they've helped us with connections and stuff. But here's the thing: I can't get corporate sponsors.
Yeah.
Or the like, because the Pacific is just not investable by a big corp. There's 12, not enough people, various income levels, and all these different cultures and types of people. So it's very hard for a big food company or a big whatever company to come in and say, here, as part of our corporate social responsibility, we want to help you with this. So I think what I'm going to end up doing is breaking the project into pieces. We've had 5 or 6 different projects spin out of the kind of Pacific Island Food Revolution mothership. In Vanuatu and Samoa and Fiji. There are revolution projects that are in early stages but are on the move, and I'm probably best working with them until I figure out how to keep the overall going.
I mean, is there a thought to looking at it in the context of, I guess, narrowcasting versus broadcasting, and
yes,
sort of building up the sort of social media content?
Absolutely, and we have a lot of that. I mean, and I think moving forward, we would only ever do YouTube content that was television quality, so that the local broadcasters would carry it.
Oh, that's good.
Absolutely, yeah. No, and by the way, the season 1, 2, and 3 of Pacific Island Food Revolution are on YouTube, so you can go to our YouTube page and see them.
I mean, I mean, we could talk for hours here, but I'm so impressed, and so, I mean, partly because I myself went down this journey of trying to do something to address this issue. Because my cousin passed away as a result of NDCs. It is an issue that's a constant challenge and issue across our families that really is not a simple one to resolve, and one that is as much bound into the journey of Pacific Islanders into becoming global moving peoples, and I see it in the way in which, for instance, gift giving happens now, where before gift giving was all these healthy foods. Now at funerals or weddings or things, there are sweets. There are, a range of Western foods that are presented in which, people love, but at the end of the day aren't healthy at all.
No, and it's like the kind of bad end of globalization, isn't it? It's like it's a bit of the confluence of the colonization hangover and globalization came into that space, and that's been destructive.
And it also shows that it's a difference between that, and the reason I raised the issue of gift as part of food is that the gift is a rather ephemeral idea, and it is one that can change in what it's identified with. And when people value different gifts in different
that's
ways,
a really good point.
It's another issue.
The point is just to say value yourself.
Yeah.
So
let me finish with my last question, which I ask everyone on the program. I
saw that. I was like, man. Go ahead.
Maybe you don't want to answer this question. But,
there might not be 3. There may be just a couple of insights.
Okay. So if there were 3 things you would advise your younger self, given what you know now, what would they be?
I would say the first for me personally, would be to pay more attention to my father's work in particular. I had this incredible gift of a father who was incredibly forward thinking, really cared. I mean, that's the essence of it all, right? Why do we do these things? Because we actually care. And was incredibly effective and respected. And I just saw him as dad. So of course that was good enough, and that's great for a life. But I wish I could have been with him more around this, looking back. And later in his life, I was, and he was the one who was so overwhelmed when I won the Gourmand Award. So that was really amazing. Yeah. And the other thing is, I get a lot of criticism, like anyone in the public space does. And I don't know, people love to knock you down if they think you're up. And
is that the same in New Zealand as it is in Australia?
It's really bad in New Zealand. In fact, if I've got something coming up, any kind of high profile activity, I tend to get really quiet about it.
Right.
But you just got to see that as a measure of your success and not take it personally. And for the first few rounds of being, having a profile, I found that really hard. So I would say, just get over it and don't worry about it. And then the other thing is, and it's not to my younger self, it's more that you know what you know. If something's right for you, like hundreds of people told me not to write a cookbook because there's no money in it. And there wasn't, but there was everything else that I cared in it. And so, yeah, take opinions in, but you listen. I mean, it's such a cliche, but listen to your gut, because that's actually, honestly, feeling is knowing. It's not a mental thing at all.
It's funny because you're reflecting many of the things that, I think you and I have a lot in common.
Well, including a haircut.
Exactly. Well, we can't choose those bits. But my father was equally as important an influence on me, and guided some of the decisions I made in life, and that resilience that you talked about in terms of being able to withstand criticism, but being able to focus on what's important, and the last part of and gosh, I've just forgotten what it was.
About trusting your instincts.
Trusting your instincts, yes, and having faith in yourself.
Yeah,
I think is a really important part of many social justice leaders' journey. In that it's reflected in so many of the people I've talked to on the show, is that they have the same thing. Others have talked about not knowing exactly what the journey is and needing to learn it all themselves, but it is this thing where each of them clearly had a sense of what was right and trusting what they were doing was the right thing to do, and it bearing fruit, pardon the pun, in terms of what the outcomes and achievements they were able to do.
Yeah.
So
I'm with them then.
Yes, you are. So you're part of the social justice Generation alumni now, and I hope this may not be the last conversation we have, Robert.
Yeah, no, it's great to see you.
Yeah,
great to see.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of A Just Generation. Now it's your turn to take action. Change happens when we come together, so be sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode, and consider making a regular donation to the Global Centre for Social Justice and Advocacy Leadership by visiting our website www.erc.org.au/donate. Your support powers real change. Together, we can build a juster generation for all.